Hi, my name's Jaron Fisher, and welcome to Open World. Today's going to be a little bit of a time capsule, even more so than most of the previous Open World episodes have been. We're going back into January of 2002 for an event at the Texas Advanced Computing Center called Infinite Resolution Zero Latency, which is essentially the event for which I actually got a published article called The Austin View, which coincidentally is the Open World photo gallery name. And it was basically a look as we were on the cusp of a new generation of consoles, as the Xbox One was announced and getting ready to hit a couple of years later. People from Austin, professors like Bruce Pennycook, and then industry dignitaries like Dan Teasdale at the time of his tenure at Twisted Pixel, Greg Jeksnick from one of the co-founders of BioWare, months before he and Dr. Ray both wound up leaving, and just kind of getting an idea of where they thought the future of the games industry would be. And so it's going to be interesting 6 years later to take a look and kind of see where they thought things were and kind of look at where they were right in some cases and where some things were wrong. And so enjoy. Most of what you're going to see in terms of people's titles are going to be what they were at that time. I didn't particularly feel comfortable going through and searching up their LinkedIn to tell you what they're doing now. So enjoy, and I hope you have a good time getting a chance to see what Austin thought the games industry would be now.
I want to clear up a couple of possible misperceptions first before I say why we decided to have this event. The first is that TAC is a supercomputing center. We are, in the sense that we have two of the most powerful open science supercomputing systems in the world up at our research campus. But that's not all we are. We're the Texas Advanced Computing Center, not Supercomputing Center for a reason. We have very high-end visualization capabilities here as well. You're going to see a world-class visualization laboratory across the hall that has the highest resolution display environment in the world because, after all, this is Texas, so you have to be number one in things. 307 million pixel environment that's going to be showing you video and art. We have a number of other fantastic environments in there as well. And so I'm sure after tonight you'll understand that we're not just supercomputing, we're high-end computing and visualization. We also do large-scale data storage. The second possible misperception is that we're only science and engineering. That is absolutely the majority of the research that gets conducted at TAC. But we have been branching out in the last couple of years, and Rob is coordinating our efforts to do this, to reach out and use these wonderful technology capabilities to impact arts and humanities. And so while we've had people using TAC for years, studying the questions of what is life, and how do we protect it, how do we make it secure, we're now engaged in the areas of how do we make it fun, how do we make it better. And so the outreach into digital arts and humanities has been an interesting one for us. This is our first gaming night, this is our first formal gaming night. Games have been played since this lab before, I assure you. This is our first formal gaming night. We hope there'll be many more. Now, even with all that said and those two possible misperceptions cleared up, I want to emphasize that I think all of our technologies have a potential complementary role in gaming. And what we do in our day jobs, we are helping people understand the physics of the way processes work and simulate it as realistically as possible on powerful computers and then visualize the results. The fidelity, the truth of the physics comes first, and then you visualize it as fast as you can. In gaming, it's sort of like that, but a little bit inverted in the sense that you have to sustain entertainment, so you have 30 frames per second as opposed to physical fidelity is your highest priority, and then you get as much physics as the hardware will allow you to get in while sustaining that entertainment value. So we really think we have some complementary things to offer the gaming community. We really look forward to working with them, the program here at UT, and the community here in Austin.
The title of this talk is Infinite Resolution Zero Latency, and I think it leaves out the parameter of all of this that I'm most interested in, which is development time. The future of games is going to be impacted by how hard they are to build. more than anything, right? I mean, you get the Hollywood syndrome for AAA games that the budgets are huge and the risks are massive, and that tends to constrain the kinds of things that people are willing to do, and I hate to see trends like that. And so the best thing we can do about that is to try to make it easier. That means coming up with new types of software tools to make it easier. And so in addition to teaching this class, I have a lab with a lot of really bright students in it, and some of those people are doing games research, and that has been focused on these kinds of tools. And so a couple of examples is one that tries to make character rigging a lot faster, going from days or hours down to minutes to get really well-rigged characters, and it fits into an existing workflow. So we did that a couple of years ago. Another project that's going on right now is we're trying to take some technology that was actually invented by one of our most illustrious faculty members here for verifying digital systems. This is called model checking. What we want to do is apply that to having game designers be able to check the consistency of the virtual worlds that they're building while they build them, so that they can ask questions like, if you're in this state and there are certain conditions that have to be had, these characters are dead and these things have been done, we'd like to be able to tell you, you'd like to ask the question, is every path through the game that gets to this state, is that all true of those paths? Well, we want to be able to tell you that by letting you push a button. That means that you can build a much richer virtual world in much less time with much less work if we can succeed.
But I came to game development more as an observer than a player. I watched and battled with 4 kids through teenage years, and now see a distinct shift in their interest in gameplay. The 3 girls were drawn to online casual games such as Have a Hotel and other fuzzy warm things like that. My son was lost to the known universe as a tank for his WoW guild. I didn't actually see him for, I think, 2 years. But he's recovered. You never finish, just like alcoholics. So you can't show them WoW. But now I see these are now in their late teens and 20s, and they're not so interested in these games anymore, but they cannot keep their hands off my iPads, my iPods, anything mobile, anything connected, anything immediate. They love them. And what I see them doing is playing more and more rapid turnaround casual games and less of the big monsters. But not that those aren't beautiful, and they look fabulous in the other room. But I see this handheld. So my own background comes from designing and building interactive music systems. I've been doing programming since 1978 and build stuff that relates to performance of music. And it was great to see the emergence of controllers and personal sensors on Wii, Connect, even plastic guitars for Guitar Hero. And imagine being able to track pitch and rhythm accurately in real time. When we dreamed about that 10 years ago, the Connect, of course, and we do this. So all of this, I think, has had a huge impact on what people expect from games. They expect a more personal experience. So the parts of this that I see is a more mediated play, where the software and the systems know about the human, the person, the body, what you're seeing, how you're moving, what you're hearing. Right now I'm working on software that will be able to listen to you play music and then play along how you play, not how the machine thinks you play. So it's all about input from humans, and I think it will be also in handhelds, mobile devices with geospatial capabilities. We'll know where we are, we'll know what our bodies are doing, and we'll have sensors. That's what I think.
So I kind of thought about this question a lot. You know, what's the future of gaming? And from my perspective, that is an intractable question. I think it's impossible. And so if you let me, I'll just cheat and I'll restate the question a little. Where are games going? So I think in order to figure out where games are going, you have to review the trends of where they've been. So let's kind of look at the trends of the last 15 years. In the last 15 years, we've seen games with huge budgets. There was the Star Wars MMO that just finished here in Austin, the BioWare game. So $200 million reportedly to make. There's a rise recently of indie games like Minecraft by Notch. There's games that have been successful that are sequels. There's games that are successful that have been, follow-ons to that. There's games that are original and unique that show you things that no one's ever seen before. There's There's the rise of mobile gaming, and the traditional gaming is still alive and kicking and getting stronger, and there's Facebook games. There's, in the last 15 years, we've heard the herald of the death of the PC. We've heard the rebirth of the PC for gaming. We've heard consoles. There's been gender equalization in gaming. And there's even been an unfortunate backlash against gender equalization in gaming. We've seen motion controllers take place. We've seen resurgence of traditional control mechanisms take place. And so in all of these sort of conflicting trends, it's really hard to pick out, where things are going. But there is one trend that does sort of stick out, and that's that in the last 15 years, the game industry revenue has gone up by a factor of 6. And it has increased nearly every year, and has weathered itself incredibly well in the face of the worst recession we've seen in 70 years, 80 years. So I'm going to cheat a little bit more here and say that the answer to where is gaming going is actually another question. It's where is gaming not going? And I'm going to claim it's not going anywhere.
How many people heard that rumor that the new Microsoft Xbox was going to be 6 times more powerful than the old Xbox? I think that was up on IGN. I'll make a bold prediction. I'm going to say it's going to fail. Anybody else disagree? Here's why. I think it's going to fail because I think more people are going to be playing on these than anybody's going to play on the Xbox. Why? Because the Xbox 6 times more powerful than the Xbox. First of all, I don't want to try to, make a game that's going to cost me $1.7 billion to make. Okay? And, that power has to come from somewhere. You have to be able to put data into that thing in order to have all that power be used. But guess what? This is a fantastic little device that anybody can make a game on. It has democratized game development to the extent that there's something like 50,000 games available for Android, and there's probably another 75,000 games available on iOS. And almost anybody in this room can make a game this weekend if they want. That's both a blessing and a curse. Because you have to compete with a lot of people. But ultimately, content will follow success, right? Or success will follow content. So make a great game. You will be successful if you can get your word out. So do one first, and then try to figure out the other. If you ever figure out the other, come find me, because I'd like to know the answer to that too.
Hey, I'm Karen Now, and I oversee the panel programming and marketing for South by Southwest Greenburn, which is a gaming portion of the South by Southwest Interactive Festival. Previously, I was a game producer at Armature Studios in Austin. My favorite part of my job is to take the pulse of the video game community by having engaging conversations about the future of games during a very exciting time for independent development. Here are some themes that currently interest me. I'm looking forward to seeing more sophisticated games using Kinect's gesture-based UI and voice commands. I'm also anticipating more game developers working on Kinect hybrid projects that will marry a good game mechanic with interactive episodic content. I'm keeping my eye on the social mobile geolocation game space, and I'm starting to see truly fun and social games that take our geography into consideration. I'm curious to see what Will Wright and his game studio, Stupid Fun Club, will debut. They are talking about turning real life into a game using our personal data. What I'm most excited for when thinking about emerging topics in video games is to see how games can better people's lives in both the education and personal health arenas. Jay McGonigal, who will be speaking at South by this year, is working on a video game called Super Better to help people overcome depression through gameplay. Hope Lab created a video game called Remission that has proven to be an effective tool for kids with cancer. Quest to Learn in New York City is the first public school in the U.S. that teaches all their academic subjects through the lens of game design and systems thinking. Katie Salen, who launched Quest to Learn, also happens to be a graduate from the University of Texas at Austin and will also be speaking at South by. Austin is home to an amazing and vibrant game development community. I hope to see a public school like Quest to Learn in Austin one day, and to see more talented game developers reinvent education and create fun, immersive games that will help people live happier and healthier lives.
My studio, Seamless, just released our first original game today. That's a space shooter called Soul Exodus. Released I don't know how to use this, but please buy several copies. We built this game with a team of 6 people. We built it using Unreal. It was our first Unreal project. We published it ourselves on Steam. We sold it for $10. And we did it all in a market that every major publisher we talked to said was too niche, and couldn't succeed. And they may still be right, but every one of those factors, every one of those things I just named are things that over the last couple of years in particular have really started to tilt in favor of small independent game developers. A few years ago, you did not have as many options to self-publish a game, if any. You couldn't sell a game for a few bucks without people thinking that it was a cheap game or something that wasn't worth their money. You did not have access to development tools that are as powerful as they are today. So all those things, I think, have really started to coalesce and make independent game development something that is a lot more viable. And some of these games are already mentioned, but things like Minecraft, Limbo, Angry Birds, I mean, the list goes on and on. A lot of the things that the guys at Twisted Pixel have done. Those are the wildly successful ones, but there's lots of other ones that haven't been wildly successful, but have still been very successful enough for those developers to continue on and be profitable and stable. So I don't think that large-scale AAA development is going anywhere. I think, there's always going to be room for Call of Duty and those type of games. But what I do think is that, just as Hollywood has its Jerry Bruckheimer films and its smaller scale character-driven films, I hope that we're finally getting to a point where smaller independent studios can actually work on things that are focused and polished and do something really well and do something interesting and get away from that boom or bust model that sort of doomed so many of us to layoffs and getting out of the industry. So
My name is Dan Tisa. I'm a lead designer at Twisted Pixel Games, and I think the next Xbox is going to succeed because otherwise I'm out of the job. So, sorry, dude. So I actually think we're about to hit a golden age of game development. So to kind of contrast this a little bit, about a decade ago, I was working at a place called Pandemic Studios. They're kind of known as the place now, like being the poster child of a studio that didn't transition well into its current generation. And a lot of that was because of we weren't able to build content up to spec, we weren't able to produce a huge amount of content, we weren't able to finish a product on the schedule that you would need, and it sent Pandemic out of business. And there's kind of been this accepted argument for how console transitions go, is that every console transition, you relearn a new set of skills, you basically relearn how to make games again. You're learning how to do low poly work, or you're learning how to do medium poly work, you're learning how to make this content that fits exactly the console that you're authoring for. Except this generation, we kind of inadvertently did something that I don't think many people realized we did, is that we started authoring way above what the console can handle. We have stuff like ZBrush, where we're authoring things like millions and millions of polys and baking them down. We're baking them down from novel maps. But it basically means that when we go to the next generation, we have the skills to make the content for that already done. We're not going over to the start of a new console generation and rebuilding everything. We have all of our skill set. We might actually have launch titles that are decent, which is incredibly scary. But it's one of these things where it's kind of like the Citizen Kane moment. People saying, "Oh, we need the Citizen Kane of video games," and I think we passed that point a few years ago without realizing it. In that we've now defined our tools, our skill sets, even our vocabulary, like a design vocab was something that people had GDC panels about to try and make 10 years ago. We have that now. And so I think going into this next generation and going into the next 10 years, we're going to hit that golden point. We're going to have the real golden age of video games. And I think that is really exciting.
I remember back in early 80s, 81, 82, 83, gaming on ColecoVision, the Atari 2600, when I first got my first NES. And my mom would constantly walk in the room and say, get off that system, that's not going to get you anywhere in life. Clearly she's wrong, so there's a future, 30 years after that, there'll be a future in gaming 30 years from now. So I'm going to kind of tie it off what a lot of the panel members said. I think that the future of gaming is about immersive technologies. Right, so we talked about handheld devices, we talked about Kinect. Those are really perceptual, immersive technologies, right? So we've got next-gen 3D, right? Stereoscopic 3D is very big, it's been big for the last 2 CESs. We'll continue to see improvements in that area. We've got surround sound, which we're all very familiar with. We'll see advances in the audio perception. There's haptics, right? So everybody here that plays consoles, you're used to that controller vibrating when something happens in the game. You'll start to see those technologies improve. Virtual reality will bring in a lot of those different perceptual aspects and really have a full-figured virtual environment where we're going to put a heads-on display on your head and move around. We've talked about gesture, right? So interactional immersion technology. So being able to touch a device, being able to use hand gestures, motion tracking, being able to move. But there's one piece of immersion that I haven't heard anybody talk about, and that's really the consumer getting involved in game development. Whether you realize it now or not, consumers do affect the direction of games before they've been released. Many of you in this room, probably all of you in this room at some point, have participated in some type of closed beta for a game. If you're lucky, you've gotten it earlier than that to friends and family. A lot of directional changes happen after closed beta starts. So I think you're going to see the future. You're going to see consumers getting started even earlier in the process, maybe pre-alpha or alpha, and really dictating what the storyline is, what the characters are, and where the game goes.
I'm very happy we made it here in Austin. I think we actually specifically selected the location, which happily ties into what I'm talking about in a sense. And that was there's a huge history of people making online games here, connected games, and that's actually where I think the future is going. So I usually take these things and really pull them far, far out in the future. So initially I would have said, well, what I'm talking about is crazy talk, but we're actually starting to see it now. So I actually really believe the future is actually handheld, but that handhelds aren't really going to be handhelds anymore. The way I see it is it's literally going to be play anywhere, and then eventually platform agnostic. So play anywhere is literally, and I think we can probably see this in a few years, you'll walk into a room, throw your iPhone 17 on the table, your TV will start up, and you'll have some kind of virtual controller that you don't have to touch to interact with, and then your game. And that can happen anywhere. Maybe I can go on the screen right here if I drop it on this table here. That's actually the kind of anywhere concept. And I think the connectivity around that is, we're already seeing that. We're already seeing a lot of the pieces of that in today's world. And the agnostic piece, and it's not saying platform's not important. Like platform's still important, but literally the game you play will probably be playable on practically everything, practically the exact same way. You're not going to have the huge difference or differential between what you see on a handheld device and a top-end PC. I think it kind of comes back into what a couple of the people talked about in terms of the fidelity of content. If there's a finite level to what we can build, and pretty soon you'll be able, as soon as you can show it on a handheld, you're going to see this parity between systems. So, it's kind of cool, it's kind of out there, and finally the real endpoint is, hey, what controller at all? I think that's the Connect in some ways. It's interesting because it's the first step, and when we look at it from a development perspective, we were always very skeptical in that we didn't know what it could do other than funky interfaces. But that's the change as people smarter than us figure that out. Young people who are more hungry and aren't jaded like we are. Like that. But, something says someone's going to click on someone, and all of a sudden we're going to realize just the power of those things and how they actually when create them miniaturized and available. So anyway, I'm getting the wave. I want to make sure everyone has a great time. This is a really great event, so thanks to all the panelists. It's really cool.